Hello everyone, welcome to session 1 of a programme of speech and language therapy training aimed at developing our awareness of speech, language and communication development. My name is Emma and I'm a speech and language therapist working within the Harmony Trust. So today we're going to talk about basics and we're going to think about how we first learn to communicate and the skills we need to give effective non-verbal communication. So these sessions were initially planned to be delivered live. So with you guys being able to participate as well, rather than being pre-recorded as we have to do at the moment because of the current pandemic. Hence this slide. In fact, this session was actually completed by some teaching assistants in Harmony Trust Academies at the end of 2020. This recording, however, is a new recording of the session. So as a result, there will be no discussion, I'm afraid, but I will highlight any questions that were asked or points raised during the live session as we go through today. So let's get started. So what is communication? Well, as a speaker and a listener, we should be aware that these roles move around. So 1 minute, it's important for us to be the speaker, but it's also just as important for us to stop and be the listener and to listen to the children that are talking to us. I think sometimes we forget that we have to be a listener too. And if communication is about giving and receiving messages, then if we're not listening to our children, then the reason the communication isn't successful is because we're not the listening. So to be a listener, you have to be able to know where to give your attention. For communication to be successful, we also need to have a language that we both understand. So does anybody know how many different languages are spoken in their schools? So when I carried out this training with ALT, the answer was around 27. In Northmoor, it was around 33. In Westwood, 15, and in Richmond, we thought it was about 26 different languages. That is a huge amount of languages and knowledge that our children have about different languages. And it is so important that when we are talking to our children and our pupils, that we are aware of how their language is developing in their home language and also how much English they understand. If you, as an English speaker, are using words which are new to the child, you must find another way to help them understand the words you are using. The easiest and best way to do this is to show the child what you are talking about at the same time as you are saying the word, i.e., point to what you are saying or show the child a picture. Non-verbal communication, such as pointing or showing a picture, allows us and our communication partner, i.e. the person we're talking to connect through those modes of communication and not just rely on the spoken word. This leads to a more successful interaction. We also need to know the rules that guide the conversation. This means that everyone involved needs to understand social communication rules, such as one person talking at once, that you look at someone when they're talking to you, that you respond to questions, that you ask appropriate questions, and that you stick on topic, rather than trying to change the topic or the agenda to something that suits you or that you want to talk about. So now we're going to have a look at how we learn to communicate. So if we look at our picture here, we've got a picture of our tree. So when we learn to communicate, we start at the bottom. So like when a tree grows, we need some good roots. So we learn about play, turn taking, listening, attention, eye contact, gestures such as pointing and body language, and shaking and nodding your head. These are all important areas that we need to learn about before we can move and continue to develop our communication skills. If we think about what I said in the last slide about needing to have one language, in any language, pointing means the same thing. So does eye contact. So if I point at something, you know what I'm pointing at, no matter if we speak the same language. You can see where I'm pointing to, and we have had a minimal but still some sort of effective communication. I wanted to show you something and you have seen this. To demonstrate the power of nonverbal communication and especially pointing, try this with the next person you see. So when you're in a conversation with this person, without changing the conversation you're engaged in, randomly point to something and watch for that person's response. 9 out of 10 times, they will automatically look to where you have pointed. So now we have the roots, we can start to grow the trunk of our tree with the development of our understanding. This is where it is important that we as adults talk to our children about what they see, are interested in, and what is happening. This is the best way for children to learn the names of objects and what words to use. It is important that when you are with the child, you are naming what they are seeing and talking about what they are doing. For example, if the child is playing with Lego, it's not okay for us to just leave the child to play with the Lego. All they will learn is to play. But if we look back to our tree, there's so much more in our roots that we need to learn in order to develop our understanding. So we need that interaction with the child. We need to play with them so that they can develop turn taking, listening, shared attention and eye contact. But in also to develop their tree trunk, which is their understanding, they also need us to play with them and talk about what they are doing. We need to be repeating the words over and over. So the child needs to be hearing the word Lego. We need to be talking about the colours, that Lego is bricks and that you can build with them. We can talk about the sizes of the bricks and what we are building. When we have repeated this game enough, that the child now understands what the word Lego means, they might choose to use the word themselves. But remember, they don't have to, and you can have successful communication without them saying the word, through gestures. But if they decide to use the word, they might not quite say it right, and that's okay. All we do in this instance is keep repeating it back for them to hear said correctly. And this is when the leaves of our trees start to develop. So first, the child might say yayo, or they might say yago. This is fine. The child is communicating. They are getting their message across. We understand that their meaning is Lego. And over time, the child will learn how it's meant to be said. So what skills do we need? So communication is complicated and involves many different skills. When we did this session live, I asked the staff to think about how you communicate and tell me ways that they communicate effectively with their children. The suggestions I got were: we talk to them on their own level, we use facial expression, hand gestures, objects and pictures, so we show them some visuals, we use communication in print, and eye contact. Staff also said they comment on what the child is doing to support their communication. The next slide shows us a list of how we do communicate, and I've broken them down into non-verbal skills and verbal skills. You'll see that the non-verbal list is much longer than the verbal list. In fact, only 7% of a communication attempt is verbal. The rest is non-verbal. Well, by verbal, we mean the words that the child is using. Only 7% is verbal. So what skills do we need to understand spoken language? So we need to be able to listen and concentrate. So if I said to you, fold your arms and sit up straight, you know what words I said, but was I happy or cross with you when I said them? You don't know because you couldn't see me. And it's difficult to understand a message if you can't see what is happening. I said at the start that we needed to be able to listen and concentrate, but actually that example is an example of how we need to be looking. So unless you were looking at me, you wouldn't be able to fully understand the meaning of the words I said. We need to be able to hear in order to understand spoken language. How would you feel if this whole training was delivered with me whispering, and if that went on all day? If you are unable to hear what is being said, or if it's difficult and too quiet, it's very hard to concentrate. It can be tiring. You might hear the wrong words, become frustrated, which can result in behaviours that challenge. This is why it's really important to be aware of the child's ability with regards to hearing. Do they have any deficits in this area? And if so, how can we support them to hear us more clearly? Listening and concentrating. There is no point talking to a child if they are not listening and if they are not concentrating. Your message will not be heard. The child will not understand spoken language. They will not have been exposed to the words and the vocabulary that you are using, and they will not be able to follow through with any instructions you are giving. You must make sure the child is listening and you have their attention before you expect them to understand spoken language. The next session in this schedule of speech and language therapy training events focuses more on developing attention and listening skills. So what other skills do we need to understand spoken language? We need to be able to remember what's been said. So we have two types of memory. So we're going to do a little experiment. So if you can repeat after me, please. 8, 2, 5, 6. 9, 1, 2, 7, 5. 3, 2, 5, 4, 8, 7. 48197226. Now, tell me, or say out loud to yourself, 6 types of fruits. I'm going to take a good guess that all of you could name 6 types of fruit, but can any of you tell me the numbers that we said before? I'll take another guess that you're unable to tell or retell the numbers that we said before. You could remember the fruits because these are stored in your long-term memory, but the numbers only got as far as your short-term memory, and short-term memory only lasts for a few seconds. Experience of, in this case, fruits, and repeatedly hearing, seeing the words and the objects. With fruits you can smell them, so experiencing them helps you store those words in your long-term memory. So we need to remember this, and we need to think about how we can use our children's experience in order to help them learn and remember. From our example, we've learned that there's no point just asking them to repeat once or even twice. The child needs to experience the word in order to learn it and in order to understand spoken language. So for example, let's say we're in an English class and you're trying to help the children learn a new word, and that new word is sarcophagus. There is no point you saying to the child once sarcophagus and then asking them to complete some work about it. What you need to do is create opportunities for the child to say the word. The child should whisper, shout it, sing it, say it normally, say it in a high-pitched voice, a low-pitched voice. They should draw one. They could make one, and they could talk about what they look like. They may think about what they might smell like, how they might feel. All of this helps the word move from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. So please, when you are working with children, think about your target words, think about your learning, and how you can make this more interactive so the child can experience it. This will help their learning move from short-term memory to long-term memory. We also need to be able to understand words and sentences. So if I said to you, place your phalanges on your laterus malleus, do you understand that? No, probably not. And why? Because you don't understand the words. Can you repeat it back? You could probably give it a bit of a go, but you probably wouldn't be 100% correct. And that's because you need to understand the words and remember the words before you can say them. Remember our tree? You need to have the roots and the trunk, so the understanding before the leaves. Helpfully, the tricks we can use to help a child remember new words, so moving from short-term memory to long-term memory, also work to help them when they are learning new words. So make your learning interactive, and that will target the child's ability to remember new words and understand words and sentences, which are all vital skills. In order to understand spoken language, we also need to have ideas and find the right words. So take a minute to think to yourself, if you could do anything in the world, money no object, what would you do? To do this, you had to think of ideas, you had to hold them in your head, you had to maybe discard some ideas when a better idea came in, and you had to consider all options. Is this really what I want? And is there anything better? All of this uses thinking, and thinking needs language. Thinking needs words. If we haven't taught our children words, then they can't have logical thoughts which can develop. When children are learning 2 languages, they may code switch. This means using words from different languages in the same sentence. This is perfectly normal, and we shouldn't presume because a child knows a word in one language, they will know the word in the other. The words need to be taught across both languages. If the child doesn't have experience or exposure to the words, they will not be able to have ideas and they won't be able to find the right words. So in your own time, I'd like you please to have a think about a child's communication that you work with and write down a skill that you would like to help the child to develop. I'd also like you to think about a word that you want to teach them to understand. Spend time with your child and specifically focus on increasing their awareness of this word. Teach them the word. Think about all of the ways I've just spoke about to how we help children understand and learn new words. The link on this next slide should take you to a YouTube clip for a video of a cartoon called Pingu, which some of you might know. Pingu is a little penguin who lives in an igloo with his family. They don't talk English. In fact, they don't use any words to communicate, but the family are able to effectively communicate with each other. What I'd like you to do, please, is to go to this clip and watch it and see if you could understand what it was Pingu and Dad were trying to say to each other. Think about whether it was an effective communication or not. After you've watched the clip, and if you're thinking about, can you understand what they were saying? You might say, yes, you could actually get a grasp of what was happening in the clip because you could understand the body language that Pingu and his dad were using. But there's more to it than body language. There are other examples of non-verbal communication being used effectively in the clip. So when we're talking about non-verbal communication, we are thinking about things like the child or our voice. So are we speaking softly? Are we cross? Does our voice sound cross? Are we talking really fast because maybe we're in a rush? We're thinking about the pitch that we use. So are we quite high pitched because maybe we're a little bit tense? Are we low pitched? We're thinking about our intonation. So often at the end of sentences, we might go up at the end to kind of show that we're asking a question. Non-verbal communication, we're also thinking about the volume of our speech. And we're thinking about any other contextual clues we can give, such as our facial expressions, our gestures, our eye contact. Across cultures, non-verbal communication has always provided unique opportunities to get messages across, and it can be the most effective way to communicate with someone. Remember when we spoke about how when we communicate, we said only 7% of communication is verbal, or the words? Well, it should be no surprise, therefore, that about 93% of communication involves non-verbal communication. If we think about when we're abroad, we'll get back there one day. You're asking for directions. You've not got a clue what the person trying to help you is saying. But if they are pointing, gesturing, using their facial expressions, you've got a better chance at following their directions. Who likes to watch how something is done in order for them to copy it? I know I do. This is because, as well as hearing the instruction, I am seeing it. And a combination of both helps me learn what I have to do. Non-verbal communication gives us another way of seeing and understanding what is being said and what is being asked. So that combination of non-verbal communication and verbal communication is extremely important. To support our children to follow our instructions, it's vital, therefore, that we are effectively using a range of non-verbal communication alongside our spoken word. Please think about this and the non-verbal communication you are using and how you can improve it. So I'm not going to read through all of these 6 points. They're all talking to you about why non-verbal communication is important. But if we can just think about point 3 now. I can say the exact same sentence. Yeah, well done. Yeah, well done. But my non-verbal communication is different. Yes, I know you can't see me right now, but I was able to change my voice to show you different meanings and allow you to understand what I was thinking and the actual message I was trying to get across when saying those 3 words. Non-verbal communication, remember, is more than just body language. It includes your intonation and how your voice is sounding. So your pitch, your volume. When children are having difficulty interpreting non-verbal communication, they may find sarcasm very hard to understand. That's why it's really important to use our non-verbal communication when trying to get across non-literal meanings. So should we always use non-verbal communication? Well, actually, non-verbal communication can mask difficulties in understanding spoken language because the listener might rely on non-verbal clues, and so the child might actually appear to be understanding more language than he does. So, for example, in the classroom, you might give a whole class instruction like, okay, everybody stand up and stand behind your chairs. And every child in your class is going to do that. All it actually takes is one child to understand the instruction and follow through. Everybody else can copy that child. So sometimes it can be appropriate to withdraw non-verbal communication. These times are when we are trying to assess a child's ability to understand what we are saying. So if you are specifically trying to get an idea of what the child understands, it's really important that you try and limit your non-verbal communication, because all those clues that you are giving about the context of your instruction will help the child follow what's being said. Whereas if we can hold back our non-verbal communication, all the child has to go on is the words and the language we've used. Okay, so this next slide has just been put in because I feel that wearing face coverings has created an extra challenge to us when it comes to communication, and unfortunately I think that they are around for a while, so we might just need to have a little think and find new ways to communicate while wearing them. So really quickly, I just want to talk to you about the need to be self-aware. So be aware about what, I know there's not a lot of your face on show when you've got a mask on, but be more aware of what your face and your body language is saying. So be more aware of your non-verbal communication, your tone of voice, and maybe speaking loudly and clearly enough for the child to understand. Make sure you've got your child's attention before you start talking to them, and check their understanding of what you've asked. We don't just have to think about our face mask, we also have to think about social distancing and our physical distance between other people. So speech might sound quieter because sound levels go down with distance. Focusing your attention on speech can be harder at a distance with other sounds in the background, like the birds chirping or a car radio playing or other people talking. We can't lean in or get closer or use other similar strategies to help fix a communication breakdown. And it's more difficult to see visual cues such as facial expression, the speaker's lips at a distance. So we must be mindful of this. Here are a few things we can do to help. You could take a photo of yourself and pin it on your top, so that when the child is talking to you, they can see what your face looks like. You should tell the person your name and what it is you're going to do. Make sure you use your body language, gestures and eye contact to help you get your message across. Speak loudly and clearly to help the person understand you. Face your partner directly, make sure nothing is blocking your view. It can help if you talk a little bit slower. And be sure to ask your communication partner if they understand you. And if not, find another way to get your message across. So do you need to repeat yourself? Do you need to say it in a different way? Do you need to write it down or show them? Sometimes you might need to move to a quiet place. And if you're talking to someone new, be sure to ask them if there's anything you can do to make communication easier for them.